today. So here on the left under location, which is what you will see when you're logged in as yourself, there are three sections we care about. We're going to spend the majority of our time in teacher tools, but we're going to cover web links and classes first, and we'll get into why in a moment. But during your day-to-day use, teacher tools are where you're going to be spending 99% of your time managing your class after you've gotten yourself set up. And then just to double check, Tony, we are recording already, correct?
Yes. And I'll record the next session too.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if I go a little too quickly, it's because we learned in our last session that these take a little bit more than an hour. So I'm changing up the format a little bit. And if you need to, you'll be able to review this session as well as an asynchronous playlist from the Securely company themselves. But let's go ahead and get started in the the web links session here. Now, web links are going to be a object you use in managing your class for forcibly opening websites on your students' Chromebooks. You can also use it to restrict them to certain websites on their Chromebooks, which we'll be covering in the teacher tools as well. And also in a moment, we're going to cover the custom block list and some potentially new features in it as well. I don't know if they've been pushed just yet, but you have the ability when starting a classroom session to prevent students from going to sites that you know are disruptive, such as if you're an English teacher, you might want to add cool math games to your custom block list. But first, let's very quickly go over what web links look like and how to make them, how to delete them, and create a collection. So here I have 13 web links. They are essentially just a URL, which you can see on the right over here, and a name that I give them. The only other object you'll find in web links is the collection or folder here, which is purely just a series of websites. You'll see why it's advantageous to keep groups of them in a moment. Essentially, it will just speed up the features like site locks. If you know you're going to be repetitively locking students into a series of websites, then that will become very helpful to you. So to create a web link so that you can push it to students or lock them into that site, we click web links on the far left panel under location. We choose the create button right here with the green plus sign, and it asks for some basic information. So first it wants a name. In this case, we'll just go ahead and create a web link for the cnn.com website. We'll call it CNN because it only needs the name. And what I recommend you do for the URL, go to the website that you want to visit and copy the URL from the URL bar. It's important to do that so you can guarantee that you have the exact redirected link. It will actually speed up the process for students to load the page, and we'll just paste it into this URL field here. We don't need to add a description. In my opinion, the names are self-descriptive enough. So this is all we need. We're going to go ahead and click save. And now we can see that I've gone from 13 to 14 web links. And right here in alphabetical order, we can see CNN. If you want to find a particular web link of yours, you can use this search bar in the upper left. For example, in our last training, I created the web link for Newsella. So if I search for news and then press enter, I can see that Newsella comes up. I'm going to go ahead and delete this and press enter, and that will remove that filter showing Newsella, and we can see all of my web links. Now, I've been mentioning that these are my web links, and that's essentially true. You may have noticed that there's a column here called owner. This has the email of the person who created it. However, some of you may or may not by default have this box here checked. This box, in my opinion, is very important. If it is not checked, you'll see that it reloads all of the web links, and we've gone from 14 to 1 through 50 of 393. So by default, if this box is not checked for you, you will see everyone's web links. I do not recommend using this view because you never know if another teacher is going to change their web link. And it's so simple to create them that we're frankly going to skip over the cloning function because I just recommend making them from scratch. It's so simple and avoids so many potential problems. I don't deem it worth keeping or worth using. So the last thing we need, or last two things we need to cover are deleting a web link and creating a collection. So I'm going to click the CNN web link that I created and then click the delete button. It does not ask for confirmation. You merely get a confirmation message at the top that says operation completed. Let's go ahead and create a collection now. So collections are just groups of sites put together. I'm going to go ahead and click 3 sites just for the sake of demonstration. With the little blue check mark in the checkbox on the left, I can then go to the create collection button right here. It will ask me to name it some random sites, not important for the description. We'll go ahead and click create. And if I scroll down, well, actually, before I scroll down, you can see the web links that I had already made are not affected in any way, shape, or form. And you can now see that there is a collection called Some Random Sites. If I click that, I can see all of the sites in there. If I would like to add a web link, I can click the button, and then it will be dynamically added to this web link collection. So to do that, I pick a web link. In this case, we'll choose the flags video. Hit add web links to collection, and you can see there are now 4 links in this web links collection. If I would like to remove one, I click the site itself, and then I can click the remove from collection button, and we are reduced to 3 links. That covers all of the web links under the web links category, but we do have one more tab to look at called custom block list. So here you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sites in my custom block list. Creating the block list works almost identically to the web links. Essentially, when we start our classroom session, everything in this block list is going to be automatically blocked if you choose it to during the classroom session. So for example, I do have cool math games in here, and we'll actually demonstrate that with Tommy in a moment here on his Chromebook. To add anything to your custom block list, we can click add, we enter a URL, and we enter the notes. Notes are optional and not necessary. I'm not going to go ahead and add any, so for now I'll just click cancel. This copy organization block list is not going to be relevant. We do not keep an organizational level block list on purpose because we do our filtering through the securely web filter. And there is a delete option if you decide to remove a site at some time. So this last site that I added for from our last session, I'm going to go ahead and check this box and choose to delete it. And we will actually come back to add from recently closed. There is a nice function in the teacher tools that you can use to have the kids bring you to the sites that you know you want to block. We'll cover that in a moment. So we are now done with the web links section. We're going to move on to the classes. And for the moment, we're going to unfortunately have a bit of a bad demonstration because we don't have the Canvas classes imported yet. We can't do that at this moment. So right now I'm going to be referencing the Google Classroom Classes tab. I believe it will say Canvas Classroom Classes after the import is completed. So I'm going to do a quick search here. Unfortunately, since I'm an organization admin, I can see all of the classes that were ever created in Google Classroom. So I'm going to do a quick search. You can also perform a search if you find that it's difficult to search for your particular classes by name. So let's do this. Here we go. So if I search for IS Test, I can find my 3 classrooms that contain IS Test. I'm going to go ahead and click this first one here. Now this takes us to our class session details. This is where we can set up an automatic scheduled classroom session. We're going to cover how this is different than manually starting a session in a moment. But to begin with, let's start with our check boxes. So to begin with, we have the ability to automatically start this class. And since you guys are all in secondary, I imagine you're going to want to do this with each one of your class periods. Otherwise, it gets fairly repetitive for you guys. So let's go ahead and check this box. And for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to say that I'm teaching this class every Monday, Tuesday, and then Friday. And we have to provide a start time for this session. So I'm going to say the start time is 8 a.m., somewhere around the first period. And we'll make the default length 55 minutes because I believe that is the high school classroom period length, or at least it was the last time I looked. We'll explain that in a moment when we get into the teacher tools, how the classroom length is relevant. See, under the class options, by default, enforce custom block list is not checked. This is up to you whether or not you feel like you need to include your custom block list. For example, if you have a very well-behaved class and you're not trying to force them to stay on task with that block list and stay off of cool math games, you might determine it's not worth enabling every single classroom session. I actually recommend that you leave the organization block list off in an attempt to avoid confusion. So just never touch this. The organization block list is effectively a dead feature for us. What you guys would want to focus on is the custom block list, whether or not to check that. This feature here called close all open tabs when class starts. I generally don't recommend using this feature. It does exactly what it says. So at the scheduled time when your class starts, all of the tabs your students already have open will be closed simultaneously, including the entire Chrome browser. This can be really confusing and jarring, and if they were already working on classwork, you can accidentally interrupt it. You can, if you feel the need to, enable it and then give them a default countdown of how long they have to save their work or be prepared to have everything closed. The default is 10 seconds. I personally find that very short, but since I don't generally recommend it, it's at your discretion though. I'm going to leave it off. And in this last section here, we have the ability to limit the number of tabs that students are allowed to have open. I, again, generally don't recommend this as there aren't a ton of benefits to doing so. If you would like to limit students in an attempt to keep them on task, for example, if they're doing a research paper and you know the only two tabs they should be using are Google Docs and the Google search page, it might behoove you to limit them to 2 tabs, but that makes it very difficult to open up an additional tab for research. So I would not recommend that. The only other advantage to limiting their tabs, if you're trying to keep track of every website all of the students are going to, this will reduce the number of tabs that you have to read as you skim over your class. But for now, I'm going to leave them set to unlimited. If a student does try to open a tab beyond the limit, it will simply close one of their other tabs, which is another reason I don't recommend leaving it on. For the last 3 checkboxes, these features here cover the these features here cover the interactivity between the teacher and student for the very limited communications that Securely Classroom Manager has. So there is a raise hand feature for the student to try and discreetly get your attention. This will effectively flag their device with a little orange hand that will be showing later. And there is a limited chat function as well. I believe this will be redundant for most of you since I believe everyone is using the Zoom chat. So we'll try to spend not too much time on that. And then we have the play chat alert and sound on student device. This can be useful if the student doesn't see the notification from a message that you've sent them. I'm going to go ahead and allow all 3 of these because they are only going to need to be quickly covered. And I will click save. Now, if I find that I need to adjust this classroom schedule, let's say one of my classes got moved from Friday to Thursday, I can, let me back up. If one of my classes got moved from Friday to Thursday, I can search for my class again, click that class, and then uncheck the Friday and check the Thursday start time. And that will That will resolve any schedule changes I need to make. And again, if you decided that you needed to retain your students for an additional 2 minutes, or your start time was moved, you can adjust all of those settings after the fact. Go ahead and leave that as is, and we'll click save. Okay. And that essentially completes everything that we're going to be interested in under the classes section. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the teacher tools, the real meat and potatoes of this software. So to begin with, you're presented in the teacher tools section with a list of classes from a drop down here. And again, since I'm an organization admin, I can see everything, unfortunately. So I have to do a search for my classes. I'm going to search for test classroom 1. And down at the bottom, you can see that there's a list of 3 test students in this class. That's important to note because not every student is going to always be attending in your class. If you know that one will be absent, you can uncheck that student by clicking them here, or if you're going to have more absent than attending, you can click none and then individually check the ones that are going to be there. In this case, I want to leave all of them there for demonstrative purposes. But generally, the way that the Securely Chrome tools works is, or sorry, the Classroom Manager works, is if you leave all of the students checked and some of them are absent, they're displayed in alphabetical order and Securely hopes that that student at some point is going to join the session. If they never do, they're effectively taking up space in your classroom view because you can only see so many students at one time on your screen. You generally don't want to waste any screen real estate on students who aren't there. So after selecting our attendance, and in this case, I'm going to leave all of the students in there, I'm going to go ahead and start class with this green button here. Now, starting class is effectively the same thing that the automated schedule does.
Hey, Corey, can I cut you off real quick?
Yeah.
I just getting a bunch of questions. Just want to clarify that the classes, anyone who's following along in Securely, the classes are not synced.
They are not.
They will sync from Canvas sometime in the next week. You will not need to do anything. That is why all your classes are from last year. So that will be synced automatically.
Correct. There'll be a communication going out when we begin, well, I believe when we are going to be releasing the tools and when the syncing starts. Okay, so back to starting the class here. So we had set up a classroom schedule, but in the event that the schedule had already started, we would not need to click this button, but we're going to go ahead and do so for the sake of manually triggering it. Starting this class effectively starts a timed session where you have limited control over the Chromebooks. An automatic classroom session that we covered in the classes portion under location is effectively the same thing, but all of the information was predefined. So if I click the start class button, you can see that a lot of these checkboxes look very familiar. It wants to know how long the classroom session runs. Do we want to use our custom block list? Do we want to use the organization block list? Do we want to close all tabs when the class session starts? So I'm going to go ahead and customize this real quick. The only major difference is instead of providing a start time and then saying how long we want the class to run for, we are instead either providing a length of time. The start time is already filled in from whatever time it is now since you're manually initiating the class. You can either provide a length of time in minutes or select an end time from a drop-down menu. We'll go ahead and do that. 12:39 p.m. 105 minutes is what it calculated. And in this case, we are going to leave all of the boxes for raising the hand, initiating chat, and we're going to change the limiting of tabs to unlimited. And then once we have our settings set the way we like, we can click start. But again, if you have automatic class scheduling, you won't have to do any of this. We're going to click start. And if you had done automatic class scheduling, what it will look like, here, let me go ahead and log out and then back in, and I think it will demonstrate this for us. So let's say your class schedule had started without you under an automated scheduling task, and you just get signed in. All we have to do is search for our class, and if it hasn't changed in any way, oh, here we go. we can see that my classroom session is already still running. You actually do not need to be logged in for your classroom session settings to apply. That is very important. In the event that there is a school day off, your classroom session settings will apply during school hours still. Okay, so this is effectively the view you will see if you're using an automated classroom session. As soon as you get logged in and select your class from this drop down right here, you'll see that the class session is already running with the timer counting down so that you know exactly how long you have control over those devices. If for whatever reason, while you are in the middle of your class session and you realize you need some additional time because you're running over today, you do have the option of clicking this little green button here. This green button will add an additional 5 minutes to your timer. So you can see I went from 1 hour and 43 minutes to 1 hour and 48. Clicking it again will just repeat that function. And you can allot yourself as much time as you need. Okay, so we're going to move into the classroom-wide tools and then the student-specific tools. There are 6 classroom-wide tools: the screen lock, site lock, release, push URL, announce, and share screen. We're going to cover them not quite in that order. I'm going to try and do it in a way that's most relevant. We're going to start with screen lock, sorry. Now, screen lock is a little bit of a deceptive name. If you guys can pin, or if you, Tommy or Tony, if you can spotlight Tommy's video to do a side-by-side, but if they cannot, feel free to pin Tommy Day's Chromebook video feed. He has a live feed from a Chromebook, so you can see the entire desktop and get a perspective on what the student is going to see. And speaking of, actually, I'm going to go ahead and stop this class for a moment. If you want to take a look at Tommy's screen in the lower right, when I stop this class, Tommy actually gets a notification in the lower right of his screen indicating that the session is now over and he's no longer being monitored. However, at the start of class, whether or not the teacher is logged in yet, if it's an automated class, I'm going to go ahead and start it again. We can see that Tommy gets another notification indicating that the class session has started and his teacher is able to monitor his activity. But moving back on to the classroom-wide tools, while we still have Tommy's screen pulled up, I'm going to go ahead and click the screen lock button. Doing so prompts me and asks the question, do you want to apply screen lock to all devices in this class? In this case, the answer is yes, but the reason it is asking, I'm going to click no first, is because we have the ability to actually screen lock individual students merely by clicking on their display. So in this case, we're going to pick Tommy by choosing this test student number 2 here. And when I click his screen here, his little screen preview, we get a green checkbox. When I click screen lock, it no longer prompts me to apply to the whole class. Instead, it asks me to supply a message to put over the screen lock. I'm going to go ahead and deselect Tommy and apply this to the whole class though. So I'm going to click yes for the whole class. In this case, the default message is fine, but we can customize this to whatever we want. I'll add some gibberish for effect. And then we click screen lock. Now, from the perspective of the teacher, you can see that their screens now have an overlay message, and this would imply heavily that their entire screen is blanked out, rendering the Chromebook useless. However, if you look very carefully at Tommy's screen, you can see that only the tab he's in has been blanked out. Tommy, go ahead and go to another tab for me. And then that tab, as soon as it's done loading, is blanked out. And if Tommy were to visit a new website, it would also be locked out. Now, it's important to note that only the tab is blanked out. They can still use the browser just completely ineffectively, and they can still use the Zoom app. The screen lock only applies to the websites that they visit in Chrome. So it's a little bit deceiving. You can tell that students are still screen locked with this orange circle with a white padlock in the middle. That's important to note in case you ever lose track of which students you're currently applying this to. Since we don't need Tommy to be screen locked anymore for this demonstration, I'm going to click the release button here, the little green padlock or green box with a padlock in it. Clicking release will prompt me, do I want to release all students in the class? This is going to be a very commonly recurring pop-up. I'm going to try to stop reading it every time so that we don't waste as much time on it. I'm going to select yes, I want to release all of the students in the class. And we can see that the orange or amber circle with the padlock has disappeared. And Tommy, you're on Cool Math Games. Can I have you go to something else that isn't blocked? There we go. Now, you guys may have noticed there's a bit of a delay between what Tommy does and what appears on screen, but we can see that Tommy's screen has effectively gone back to where it was. The reason for that delay is that these are not actually live feeds of what's happening on the Chromebook. They are actually screen captures of the currently active tab that Tommy or any other student has open, and it displays in what securely calls a popcorn view. So every 5 to 7 seconds, the Chromebook will send a screenshot of whatever Tommy's tab looks like and sends it to the teacher. And they'll update at random on the screen. So there's no guarantee as which one's going to refresh next. So they refer to it as a popcorn view because you never know which one is going to pop next. But they all refresh within about 5 to 7 seconds generally. So it's not meant for you to sit there and scrutinize every little mouse movement Tommy does, but it gives you a pretty good idea of what each student is focusing in on. Now, for the sake of making the other tools more effective to use, we're going to switch our views here. So this entire time, we've been using what's called the device view or the screen view, showing what the students have on their active tab. I'm going to switch over to what's called the list view. So here in the upper right of the screen where I'm circling with my mouse, you can see there's this little toggle between these 4 little boxes and these 3 list items. If I switch to the list items, I can instead see every tab that each student has open rather than a screenshotted preview of the site they're currently using. So I can tell roughly who's staying on task by what tabs they're keeping open. So here I can see Tommy has his essay, but apparently he's been spending time on Fortnite and Cool Math Games when I've not been looking. So let's give Tommy some subtle and gentle encouragement to stay on task. Go ahead and make sure you can see Tommy's screen for the Chromebook. When I click this little trash icon next to his tab, you'll see almost instantly that the tab that he has open will disappear. I'm going to go ahead and close this other tab. And then Tommy, go ahead and close Cool Math Games. You'll notice that sites from your block list will not appear in this list. You don't need to focus on those because the student just does not have access. So now Tommy's extraneous tabs have been removed and he's forced to focus on his essay for now. It also gives him a subtle reminder that you are still paying attention to what he's doing and that it did not go unnoticed that he was goofing off on Cool Math Games. So let's go ahead and move to our next tool called the push URL. This is where those web links that we covered are going to first come into play. So if I select push URL, it's going to prompt if I want to do this to the whole class. The answer is yes. And I'm going to pick, let's see, we'll choose Newsella. So we can see all of my web links, all 14 of them that we had from earlier. I still have the box checked that says my web links only so that I don't see anyone else's. If I needed to, just as a refresher, I can go searching through my web links. Let's say I've developed over 100 of them. I'll search for the word news and I can see now that Newsella is here. I'm going to go ahead and put a check next to any website that I want to appear. Let me go ahead and remove this filter. We're actually going to push out 2 websites. We're going to do Newsella and the vocabulary website. So now with both of these websites checked, when I click push URL, without any prompting, you can see on Tommy's screen and in my console in the list view in a moment, we can see that 2 new tabs have opened. So here we have vocabulary, we have the essay that he was working on, and we can see he just switched to Newsella. Now, for those of you who are watching very carefully on my screen, the tab order in Tommy's list has changed. That is because his most recently used tab has also changed. The tabs in the list view and in many other sections of the classroom management tools are ordered from most to least recently used in descending order from top to bottom. So in this case, we can see he was most recently accessing his essay. And before that, he was on Newzilla, and I don't believe he ever actually touched vocabulary.com. But let's go ahead and continue moving on. Very similarly to the push URL is the site lock. It is the second function that takes into account the web links that we created. I am going to click yes that I would like to apply the site lock to all devices in the class. And again, we're presented with our web links, but this time we have a few extra options. So at the bottom here, we have 3 new checkboxes. Now, the site lock allows us to force close all tabs that the students have open and then open the tabs that we specify. This is something I'd say you should use, what's the word I'm trying to think of? I would try and use this very carefully because in the event that you already have students who are on task, this will close their work and then open a copy of the website that they may have already been using if they were on task. So I'd say generally, unless you're assigning something new that they shouldn't already be using, I would not use this button, or sorry, this checkbox here to force close all of their currently open tabs. I've also found recently that it is quite buggy and very often that it'll simply close their tabs and then never properly open the new ones. I did get a newsletter from Securely saying that this bug is being fixed in their most recent update. However, that update has not yet applied, so we're not going to use it for this demonstration. Now, some of you are probably asking if I make a web link to a specific YouTube video or specific page on a website, can they go to the whole page or can they only go to where I link? Or if I were to send them to, for example, research.weebly.com, can they still get to games.weebly.com? And that's going to depend a whole lot on this checkbox here that says allow entire site. Effectively, what that is supposed to do is determine whether or not they're going to be limited to the root domain. So can they go to weebly.com versus games.weebly.com? Very often, if you're going to lock them into a site, it's probably an educational site and you generally are not going to want to restrict them. This is going to be based on your opinion on students' behavior and whether or not you believe parts of the site shouldn't be used for your lesson. I'm going to go ahead and leave it checked, and I recommend you do by default. I would consider this a more advanced feature, and to generally leave it checked at all times. So let's go back up to our list of web links, and this time let's take advantage of a collection. So I mentioned last time that you can add websites into groups I mentioned in the web links section that you can create lists or groups of websites together. And you can collect them thematically. So let's say, for example, you wanted to create a collection that included the Google search page, Google Docs, and Google Classroom so that they can quickly work on an assignment and turn it in. And you know that they're staying on task to do so. So in that case, you could make a collection in the web links section, check the box for that collection, and either with the push URL or the site lock, you can choose it. And then all of the URLs you had put in that collection are going to be pushed to the device. Now there is a tab down here that says do not open tab, or sorry, a checkbox down here that says do not open tabs. I do not recommend using this because if you put the students under a site lock and they don't already know what sites to go to, they're going to be very confused trying to figure out where they're allowed to go and where they're not on the internet. I like doing it this way because this actually puts the sites they're supposed to be at in front of them and then prevents them from going anywhere else. If you watch Tommy's screen very carefully, and then Tommy, just so that they can see it easier, can I have you close all but one of your tabs? Go ahead and leave the essay open, for example. And then Tommy is clearing out his tabs just so that you guys can see its effects a little better. So let's say he was working on his essay and we want him to transition, but he really wants to keep working on that essay. Let's go ahead and push a site lock to his computer now, or to the entire class. And you'll see that the 3 tabs from my web collection, including a YouTube video, are all opening on his Chromebook right now. his tab with his essay is still open, but Tommy, go ahead and go back to your essay real quick. I want to let them see it actually being blocked. So now Tommy went back to the tab he already had open, which was not in our allow list. And it is telling him that this site is temporarily blocked. Tommy, go ahead and open up a new website for them so they can see how this works. Ideally, one that loads fairly quickly. Now you'll notice the new tab page is not blocked. Securely can't do that. It's a prevention mechanism on Google to prevent malicious extensions from doing very bad things. Now, Tommy loaded that website and it was almost instantly blocked. Tommy, can I have you load something slower like Yahoo this time? You'll notice very poorly performing websites that take a long time to load like Yahoo. Sorry, hang on, we're waiting on catch up. Or YouTube will be fine, I guess. So YouTube takes a little while to load to pull the thumbnails. You notice it's not blocked right away. Securely can't interrupt the loading request, but once the site finishes loading, it'll actually be overtaken by the block message. So before it becomes useful to the student, it will be blocked out. Although, Tommy, I don't think YouTube even finishes loading because it can't get to its resources. So let's pick something else like ESPN blocked already. I don't know. Tommy's picking random things. But as you can see, new sites are automatically blocked. This is a great way to force your kids to stay on task if you're worried that they're going off on the, if you're worried they're going to go off task as soon as you're not paying attention and you don't have time to police every website they go to, this is a great way to force them to stay on task. So let's go ahead and move on to our last two classroom-centric buttons here. We have the announce and the share screen. We're going to go ahead and start with announce. But, oh, I'm sorry, let's release the site lock on poor Tommy first so he can go back to his studies. There we go. We can see Tommy's site is now unblocked. Sorry about that. Let me just turn off my phone real quick. Okay. I do actually want to double back real quick. I forgot to mention with the site lock here, I'm going to go ahead and reinforce this real quick and just do Apex. When the site lock is effective, in the screens view, you'll be able to see that in the lower right of the screen, instead of a padlock, there is an orange globe indicating that he is under a site lock. In the list view, where it shows all of the students' tabs that are open, that same orange globe icon will show up, but at the top of their page, or top of their site. What's the best way? We'll just say right next to their name right here. So I'm going to go ahead and release the site lock, and then just to quickly demonstrate the screen lock, yes, I would like to apply to all students. The same thing applies here. The padlock will appear at the top of the screen in list view and in the lower right of the device view. So let's go ahead and release them from that. Yes. Okay, so let's go ahead and use the announce function. I'm going to click the announce button, and yes, I want to apply to the whole class. And then I am going to type a custom message. In this case, let's say you have 5, oops, I did not know this caps lock is on. You have 5 minutes to turn in your assignments for full credit. I'll go ahead and click announce. And then you'll see both in the screen preview and on Tommy's full screen view of the Chromebook, this white background overtakes all of the Chromebooks and a message pops up. And then Tommy, show them what happens when you go to another tab while they haven't dismissed it yet. You can see that that message will follow from tab to tab. So they can't tell you they did not see this message. They must click OK to get out of it. I'm going to go ahead and do that on my demo Chromebook. And Tommy, you can go ahead and click OK too to get it off of your screen. So this is a great way to ensure that they've seen the information you want them to, especially during distance learning where one student might be getting up to go use the bathroom, for example. You don't want them to miss out on some information. This will guarantee that the announcement is on their screen when they get back, and they have to acknowledge it before proceeding. This last option here is going to called screen share is going to possibly feel a little redundant at first to the screen sharing in Zoom, But for those of you, once we are fully done with distance learning and we've gone back to quote unquote normal, for those of you with really oblong classrooms or displays at a far end of a classroom who have kids with difficulty seeing at the far end, this share screen function is going to be a godsend for you. It was actually one of our most requested features last year that they recently implemented for us. So when I click this, it's going to ask if I'd like to share it with all students. And again, the answer is yes, like it has been this entire time. And we're presented with a second option. Would you like to lock the students to the tab with your screen sharing session? If you choose no, they will be able to browse other tabs. That is an exact and perfect description of what's happening here. I'm going to say yes for this example. So doing this prevents me with a screen sharing dialog at the top of my browser window here. I'm going to choose, let's say, screen 2. And we'll open up a new tab here and just do a random gibberish Google search that's hopefully school appropriate. And here we can see on our student displays, Tommy's is a little lagging behind. You can see in the live view from him that it is up to date, and his popcorn view on my console just showed it correctly now. Now they can see everything that I am doing on my teacher machine. And Tommy, show them what happens when you go to a new tab or one of your previously open tabs. You can see that the site is temporarily blocked. Effectively, we are doing a site lock so that they can only view our screen. This is great for ensuring that they are paying attention to your demonstration. Like, let's say, for example, you were using an IPEVO or Elmo document camera and you're in a math class. You want to make sure they're actually paying attention to what you write and not off on YouTube or Googling somewhere else. This forcibly locks them into your screen view. But it doesn't have to just be used to strong arm the kids either. I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share and then click it again. This time I'm not going to choose to do it for all students. Instead, I'm going to click on Tommy's screen here. Let's say Tommy said he needs help with something. And while I have the other class in some breakout rooms, I can do a screen share with him. I'm going to choose no, not to lock Tommy into this, only this tab. I'm going to choose the screen to share one more time at the top of my screen, click share. And we can see on Tommy's screen, that tab with my screen being broadcasted to it still appears, but Tommy can actually still go to the other tabs and still get work done. So me and him can effectively work one-on-one, almost collaboratively, one directionally at least. And now Tommy can see what I demonstrate as he goes back to his schoolwork. So I'm going to go ahead and stop screen share again. Okay. And that about covers up all of our classroom-wide tools. Tommy, Tony, do we have any questions that be particularly relevant at this time before we move on to the individual tools?
Yeah, we got a few from Beck. We can teachers can add web links from the big giant list, correct?
By big giant list, they mean, the way I'll just quickly go back to how to add one. Oh, do they mean while they're in push URL? Well, actually, we'll cover both real quick. So the easiest way to set up web links when you're not already in a class session is to click web links on the left here. And then you can click the create option, fill out the name, fill out the URL. If you're in the middle of a class and you're pushing a URL and you realize, oh my gosh, I never actually made a web link for this, you actually can create a new web link on the fly. I just generally don't show this feature off because I prefer you guys get all of them set up in advance rather than try to do something new to you on the fly. But if you actually had to, you could just paste the URL at this top section here and then name it. And if you want to, you don't have to save it. You can just push it to the devices. But if you want to, you can actually save it permanently as a web link. So let's do Google Sheets. Oh, I spelled Sheets wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and push this URL. It's going to open Google Sheets on both of the Chromebooks in our classroom, or not if you have a horrendous typo, apparently. Let's go ahead and do that one more time. Yes, sheets.google.com. Save it as a web link. Oh, HTTPS probably. Push URL. Operation completed. I think I realized I already have a web link called Google Docs. So let me name it one more thing. And if this doesn't work, we'll just say it's a bug. Google Sheets. One more time. Nope, we'll call that a bug on Securely's part. We'll have to let them know about that. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the individual student information. Let me just reload this page real quick so I can get rid of that graphical error. Here we go. Okay, here's our running class. Okay, so while we're in the screens view next to each of our students, we have 4 different buttons that we can use. We're going to cover each of them going from left to right. These buttons, while in the list view, will actually appear above the students' tabs next to their name. We're going to go ahead and alternate between the views as it appears to be relevant. This first one is my favorite in terms of catching or organizing the students who need the most attention. And I don't necessarily mean from a disciplinary perspective. Some students actually just need more attention. And if you want to keep an eye on one of them while you know that they're struggling, you can actually use this option called pin to top. Now, normally, if we had, say, 30 students in this classroom, we would see them in a grid, maybe 4 or 5 wide and 6 deep going downwards. If I want to take a student from the very bottom of the list who I know I need to keep an eye on, I can click this little thumbtack icon. It will turn green, and it will actually pin that student to the far upper left, making them the default place where you would normally go to read. I also have a fun little saying for some of our more rambunctious students. The kids who like to sit in the back will get pinned to the top. This will let you keep a really good idea of the kids who you need to, or sorry, keep a close eye on the kids you need to most. Moving on to the next tool, we have this chat function here. We're going to cover this very quickly. If we click it, it opens up an interactive chat window where I can see a preview of Tommy's screen and a list of all the other students. Students who are present are marked with a green dot. Absent students are orange. Let's go ahead and send Tommy a random message. And on his Chromebook, you won't be able to hear it, but he'll get a notification sound. And if you're watching his screen very carefully, there's a floating notification that appears there, and it just showed up in our preview as well. If Tommy clicks that, he'll be able to interactively chat with us. Go ahead and send something back, Tommy. There we go. Tommy says howdy. We're going to go ahead and close this and move on. The next button that we're going to choose is called History. Now, sometimes you're not sure what the kids have been up to. If you've been in the middle of instruction, you haven't exactly been able to keep an eye on what they're doing as you speak. If you want to do a quick audit on what some of your students have been doing to ensure they've been on task, maybe take corrective behavior before it shows up before time to grade, we're going to go ahead and click this History button here. Looks like a little blue clock. And in that History button, we can see all of the websites that Tommy has accessed since the start of our classroom session. And I want to emphasize since the start of the session, because you guys only have access to see the sites during that classroom session. Once the session is over, or if it is manually stopped for any reason, this information becomes unavailable to you. It is retained, but for the sake of privacy, it's only retained in a manner that you guys can see for that class session. If for whatever reason you need to retain it for longer, there is a button in the upper right here where you can export a student's history. Doing so will save a CSV file that shows the same information here as in this grid, which we're going to cover now. So here we can see the date Tommy accessed the website, and in descending order from most to least recently visited, we have a list of every site Tommy's been to for this session. So we have our date, the name of the site, the title for that tab, and most importantly probably is the time spent. Now that can be very useful and very insightful. For example, down here, we can see Tommy spent some time on YouTube. We can see it was a flag video, but maybe this was a music video or some other video. We can get an idea of how long Tommy spent there by checking the time spent. This tells us how long did Tommy kept that tab open in front of him before moving on to his next thing. And in this case, we can see he spent 26 seconds on YouTube. That's not a lot. I know a lot of teachers allow kids to put on YouTube either to listen to music in the background or for some other white noise. So in this case, I could easily just assume that Tommy is merely picking something to listen to while he works. Because after that, I can see he goes right to his essay. Now in this case, unfortunately, he's only in his essay for about 44 seconds before going back to YouTube. So in this case, you may or may not consider him off task, but this gives you a great insight on what the students have actually been up to during that classroom session. We'll actually skip over these other tabs for now. They're not particularly relevant. The last thing I want to cover in here for the moment is the time spent section. Under the time spent section, you'll notice this is not updating live. That's important to note. If you're going to really drill down and specifically focus on this student's browser history in real time, you'll have to click the refresh button to see what they're up to exactly. So if I click refresh, we can see he's been to 14 websites. Now it's 15, and we can see that he went from 4 or 5 minutes on the Google Docs website to almost 7, and he's already back to YouTube. All right, moving on, we're going to go ahead and close the history section. And we're going to move on to our final button here, the little eyeball called device view. This is about the best way you could drill down to a single student for information. Now you'll notice while we're in the device view, we get an enlarged version of Tommy's screen preview. So if we needed to get a better look at exactly what he's doing, because sometimes the thumbnail is a little too small to make sense of, we can go ahead and click device view. Let's go back and show you how I got here one more time. So we click the little eyeball, it enlarges our screen or screen preview of Tommy. And at the top above Tommy, we have a lot of the same buttons here that we did before for the entire class. There's a couple of new ones. This one here called Save Screen allows us to take a screenshot of whatever Tommy is doing. This can be used for both for praise and discipline. Let's say Tommy is doing something exceedingly well. Maybe he wrote a math problem on his Chromebook that we want to demonstrate to all the other students in class. We can click the Save Screen button. At the very top of our page, it'll inform us it has been saved. I'll show you how to get there in a moment. We also have the option to quote unquote print Tommy's screen as it is right now. This will include, This will include all of the sites that he has currently open in his tabs. So I don't find this particularly relevant. I think you're better off using the Save Screen function. Let me just go back and show you how to access it. So underneath Save Screen, after clicking Save Screen, if we go back to our history button here, either from the device view or if we're in the all class view, and I click history, in both cases, we will see a tab in the history section called Saved Screens. This shows you either of the screens that either of the screenshots we had taken of Tommy's screen. I'm going to go back to our other view real quick in device view, history, saved screens. And then here we can see this other saved screen. Now, if you want to retain this for later use for whatever reason you can, the way to do that is by right-clicking and either hitting Save Image As, or you can even just hit Copy and then paste this into an email or a Google Doc. I'm going to go ahead and click the back button so we can move on. Now to get back to our full classroom view, we can either hit the back button or click Teacher Tools on the left. I'll go ahead and click the back button this time because I've been instinctively clicking Teacher Tools this whole time. And now we can see our entire class again. Let's go ahead and go back into the device view one more time because there's a couple more features I want to show. Just like in the list view, we can see all of Tommy's open tabs and we can control them. I don't think this YouTube video is relevant to what he's doing anymore. I can go ahead and close it and ensure that he gets back to his essay by clicking this little trash can here. And then finally, the very last feature that we're going to focus on in the device view and in the teacher tools overall, unless I'm forgetting something, are these little arrows in the lower right of Tommy's screen preview. If I were sharing my screen with all of the other students, like let's say, for example, I was either using the share screen function, or if we're all back in class and I don't want to make Tommy bring his Chromebook up to the front of class and then have all the kids try and stare at a small screen, and I don't want to try and fumble around with connecting it to the projector, I can merely go to the device view for Tommy, click these double arrows, and if I'm showing my entire screen to the class on a projector already, this will enlarge the view of Tommy's screen even further, effectively allowing the entire class to see what he is roughly doing. And again, this is not real time, so it's not a perfect stream, but it's a great way to demonstrate good work that Tommy is doing in class. So I mentioned that we'd go back to the web links and take a look at the custom block list again for the custom block list again, because the students are actually going to lead us to some of the websites that we know that we're gonna want to block. So if we find that students are spending a particularly long amount of time on non-school related websites, it's going to be kind of hard to remember to copy the URLs or write them down as they're visiting them. So an easy way to get those URLs of sites you don't want them to visit, when you're either in the list view here and you're clicking the trash can to dismiss a URL, or if you're inside of the device view itself and closing those sites with the trash can here, as long as you've closed that site recently, if you go to the web links and then go to the custom block list, there is a button here that says add from recently closed. I like to say have the kids lead you to the sites that you want to block, because if you click that button, we can see every site that I closed on Tommy's screen for the last few, or any student's screen for the last few sessions. I can go ahead and take a look at all of those dismissed or closed tabs, like this one for the Epic Games Store. Let's go ahead and check that one, and then, or let's check that one and this forum website, and we're going to hit add, and those two sites are automatically added to my block list. So every time my classroom session starts from now on, that block list is going to be enforced, and students will not be able to go to those sites. Now, I do mention that it's at the start of a session. So if you're already in the middle of a session, there's nothing stopping the students from going to that website until either the next day, or you click stop class. In this case, Tommy, go ahead and try and go to the Epic Games Store again. So we can see Tommy is able to get there. Go ahead and close that tab now. I'm going to stop the class, start the session again. Tommy's getting his little notifications that we're remote controlling him. Let's do start. We're going to enforce my block list. And then Tommy, go ahead. Oh, actually, I don't remember if I checked that. Let's double check that. Yep, enforce custom block list. Click start. And then Tommy, go ahead and try and go to Epic Games again. And we can see now that Epic Games is no longer available to Tommy. All right, that about wraps up all the features that we need to cover. Let's go ahead and do some of the Q&A that's left over.
All right. So there's a number of questions about, where were they? It was Canvas questions, so I was not sure.
Are we gonna have Tony try and help us? Here, let me pull up Q&A. Can you add someone else's web link from the huge list to your own list quickly? Yes, that's what the clone function is for. But frankly, it's not much faster, if any faster, than just creating it on your own. I would recommend either going to that link manually and then copying it, and then while you're in your web links, hit add, and then just paste the, oh, that's a block list, I apologize. Go to your web links, hit create, and then paste the URL in there. It's pretty much just as fast, and frankly, there's a really big margin for error if they include something extraneous at the end of their URL that you didn't see, and they may end up going to the wrong place. Let's see, what's the next one? How does setting the dates and times work with the hybrid schedule? 5-day a week, 4-day a week, Monday or Friday off, periods 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well, I'm not sure if you have alternating days of the week, as in some Mondays you are on and some Mondays you are off. But under the class scheduling, let's go ahead and revisit that. I'll search for my IS test one. Any day now. Oh, I'm not under the Google section. Sorry. IS test. So for this first one here, you can custom choose what days and what times. So if you want to select your class, you'll actually see multiple classes in here. For example, I see 3 of them right now, but if you have 7 different class periods or more somehow, if that's plausible, you'll actually be able to customize the schedule for each of them to say what days and what times. Why wouldn't you select to have the block list checked? Wouldn't you want that checked so students can't go to those sites? Not always. Sometimes you might want to be a little more lenient on what they're searching or using. It really depends on your teaching style. I would say for a lot of people, they're going to want it checked. The organization block list, you're going to want to leave unchecked because it's effectively useless. And if anything, will only ever cause problems. So, but your custom block list is totally up to you. Let's see. When you set up the things, do they save for you or do
I
you
believe
have
that's the beginning of class options is what they're referring to there.
yes, I believe it does retain that information. Let's go ahead and test that. So it appears to enforce the organization block list every time. Let's go ahead and start class and stop it and see if it remembers. I know it used to retain it, so let's see if it still does. In this case, it does, but for some reason, the organization block list is on by default. I'm going to see if I can fix that in the settings later, though. Since high school has 2 meeting times a day, can this be done with automatic time setup? We also have a different schedule 1 day a week. Automated option. Are there automated options for that? Yes, you would just pick each of the different classes. In this case, we've already done classroom 1, so let's do classroom 2. And we can set up an entirely different schedule. So we didn't use Wednesday in our previous example. I'll check that box. I'll pick the time. We'll say 9 a.m., 55 minutes. We'll leave the organization block list off and the custom one on. Click save. And now we have 2 different class schedules. If I go back into class schedule 1, you can see here that we have Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday set for 8 a.m. Unfortunately, I don't believe there's any way to say that on Monday, I want the class to start at this time, and then on Tuesday at a different time. I don't believe that's an option yet, but we can make that a feature request. Canvas server students need to click on it. I'm not familiar enough with Canvas to understand this question, but this one is, what about our Canvas site where students need to click on different modules and assignments in Canvas? What's the best way to approach that? Tony, do you have a better insight on what he means? I've never used Canvas.
Just asking like different modules inside of Canvas. So my understanding is as long as you allow Canvas site and it stays in Canvas, it should work. If it brings them outside of Canvas, then they may have issues.
If you're referring to the site lock of it, if you check, let's go back. I believe someone asked this question in the previous session. If we're under site lock here, yes, I want to apply to all, and you assign them something in Canvas and you want to make sure they can get to all of Canvas still under the site lock, you're going to want to check the allow entire site option if that's what you meant. That will let them get everywhere in Canvas. And then actually, I don't think anyone's asked yet, but in case they have or haven't thought to, this only works on district issued Chromebooks. So if they're using a personal device, then they will not show up here. And if they're using personal phone, they're certainly not going to show up here. I am not sure what the official directive is for students who refuse to use their district issued Chromebook. I will defer to curriculum on that. Okay, for this to work, the students in class have to be on my Canvas as possible to block block sites. No, there is no way to block students if they are not in your Canvas class. Although if generally, I don't think you're, to my knowledge, the idea is if they're in your Canvas class is because you are directly supervising those students. So I believe the logic is if they're not in your Canvas class, then you're technically not the person observing them. But I might be misunderstanding how that works in Canvas. Can you pin more than one student? Yes, you can. I made a quick reference to this, but didn't demonstrate it. I mentioned all of the kids in the back can be pinned to the top. You'll see that each of the newly pinned students has a green outline around their thumbtack, whereas our missing student does not. And if I were to click that pin button again, they'll go back to their original alphabetical order. If a student restarts their Chromebook when they log back in, will they automatically be re-enrolled into the securely session? Yes, they do not get a choice in that. So effectively, the securely software is a force installed extension on their Chromebook. And as soon as they log in, it goes checking to see if it's already in a class session. Tommy, for the sake of demonstration, can you sign out of your Chromebook and sign back in while this class is active?
Yep.
Okay, and then in the meantime, we'll move on to the next one. I need students to record their voices using a particular site. They couldn't use it at school. Will they be able to use it if I share it with them through securely? No, if a site is blocked while they're in school, then it will not be unblocked. If you would like to have it unblocked, you have to make a request to Curriculum Apps. There is a soon coming feature to allow you to whitelist sites on the securely filter. However, that still won't apply when they're on site because they are being filtered simultaneously through the securely web filter and our firewall at the same time. It looks like Tommy's getting logged back in. You can see that the site he went to is already blocked. I believe that's clever. And he has the notification in the lower right of his screen that he was already being monitored. I did not have to restart the class session just because he logged out and back in. So the students can furiously turn off their devices and sign back in. It will not make any effect. Okay, some teachers from dual language have one class with multiple level folders on Canvas. Would these students appear as one class together or different groups scheduled in the same period? Can you start a session for each group if that is the case? I am not 100% sure. I'm assuming it would actually include all of the students at once, but because we haven't completed the import yet, I am not 100% sure, or at least not guaranteed sure. I believe it'll just keep all of the students in one session. The way it works is it pulls a roster from Canvas. I don't believe it's going to care about which level they're in. Let's see, will this be posted on Canvas to review missing materials from the presentation that you missed in the beginning? I don't know if it's going to Canvas. I'm gonna say possibly. I'll defer to Tony on that, but Celia has a list of YouTube videos from the company so that you can asynchronously learn and visit just the parts that you're interested in, but you'll also have access to this pre-recording and to the one from the Tech Coach meeting as well. So if you feel like you're missing any information, you can check there. And frankly, their documentation is quite good. A quick Google search, if you're trying to do something, will probably take you to their help page, and you'll likely be able to find it even there. Let's see, is the district going to block Fortnite and other sites that are distractors to Chromebooks, or do we have to do them manually? As of right now, the categories for the Chromebooks or what the Chromebooks can browse are preset. They're not changing until we get a request to do so. I would be kind of shocked if they could actually play Fortnite on the Chromebook. I don't think they can do that. I believe they're just watching YouTube videos about Fortnite, which
correct, yeah,
like gameplay. So those are probably never going to end up getting blocked because they technically meet all of YouTube's restriction requirements for being child appropriate most of the time. So unfortunately, those YouTube videos are never going away. But as of right now, we're not making any changes to the student filters.
Hey, Corey.
Yes.
So we got about like 6 minutes, but can you show them how to uncheck students in case of the async hybrid model? If the kid is supposed to be at home and not physically in class, how they can uncheck that.
Oh, yeah. So at the start of class, unfortunately, if you have an automated class schedule, this won't work for you at all. But the way you would do that manually is by clicking any one of these students. So right now, I have not started a session and I can see my entire class roster. So if I were to click any one of these students, it'll be unchecked and therefore will not be attending class. So if I hit start class, the missing student is whited out. And okay, that's new. It used to actually move them to the end of the list so they weren't taking up valuable screen real estate. Unfortunately, it's not this time. But that would be traditionally how you do it. I think they'll probably fix that in the next release that they have. Students need to be in Zoom in order for school to work. No, students do not need to be in Zoom for this to work. This will function completely autonomously. So if you're going to just release an assignment to them and you're not engaged with all of the students simultaneously in Zoom, you can still keep an eye on what they're doing throughout the school day. For example, and I have no idea how teaching is supposed to be done in distance learning. If you were going to give them separate time off of the Zoom call to do research and you just wanted to monitor what they were doing, you could theoretically end the Zoom call and then just monitor the students' activity separately. And if you needed to, you could actually use the chat feature that we briefly showed. For our hybrid model, some students only come to class in the morning and they don't need to attend after in-distance learning. I think we just covered that one. Which teacher has the control panel, or do we both have it? How about parapros? If the parapro is assigned to the students in Canvas, I'm not sure if they are, then they will also have access. You guys can actually simultaneously control all of the devices at the same time. So you'll effectively both be able to see the exact same thing at the exact same time. One of you could lock the students into a screen lock while the other doesn't, or while the other releases them. It does play pretty harmoniously with that. Unfortunately, it's just very hard to demonstrate. Let's see. Oh, and something else that was not asked yet. Since you guys are in secondary, and there's a good chance some of you will start a class session and become distracted and accidentally let it run longer into the next class period sometime in the future. If a student moves to another class physically or virtually, and a teacher starts their own session, it will actually pull a student out of their previous session. So you don't have to worry about students being accidentally kept in the previous teacher's securely classroom session. You will always the newest teacher will always override a previous teacher, ensuring that the students are always where they're supposed to be. Sorry, you may have missed this, but can this no, the students cannot use this on a non-district Chromebook. It has to be done on a district Chromebook. I'm not sure what the official stance is. Jokingly, yesterday I was telling people you should mark them absent if they're not using it, but I don't know that that's actually appropriate. I'm going to defer to your immediate supervisor to verify what you should do to enforce that. I mean, effectively, it would be like if they were using non-district textbooks to get their work done. Hypothetical scenario on a sick day, let's say if we did not meet in Zoom because there was no class, if attendance still had to be taken, we could monitor securely to see who's working during our set time, right? That is correct. You will actually be able to see what students are actually active at all times. So if a student were to show up for attendance, or I'm not sure if you meant your sick day or if it's the students, but actually there's nothing stopping you in either scenario. Effectively, during school hours, you can use the classroom tools at any time to monitor your students. If the browser window is minimized, can we see their screen? Actually, yes, we forgot to cover this. So Tommy, can I have you open up a tab real quick that isn't the new tab page and is not blocked? I'm glad you asked that question. We'll be very quick because I know we have to end this shortly to transition. So here we can see Tommy's screen is displayed. I mentioned very briefly, this is his active tab that we're previewing on my screen. It is not his entire screen. So Tommy, go ahead and open up the Zoom app. Now, we cannot see the Zoom app because it is outside of the browser and securely does not have access to it. So from our perspective on our screen, it looks like Tommy is still working on his essay. Now, there aren't exactly a lot of non-curriculum apps that they can use on their Chromebook. Aside from Zoom, I think it's pretty much the camera and the calculator that they can play with. They're going to get very bored of those very quickly. Tommy, go ahead and minimize the browser as well. So if they have Chrome minimized, it still retains a screenshot of their most recently used tab. It doesn't really have a good way to tell if Chrome is minimized. So unfortunately, if the student is just leaving their screen as is, there's no way to particularly know about it. If you happen to notice that their screen has gone stale, you can send them a message and say, hey, I noticed you haven't been working for a while. But effectively, there's no easy way for them to get off task while appearing to be on task. And then Tommy, go ahead and actually close Chrome because there's one more message I want them to be able to see. So Tommy closed Chrome, and in place of his screen preview, we see the device online browser not support or not opened message. That is exactly what it means. The Chromebook is on, he's logged into it, but for whatever reason, Chrome is closed. This is something you'd see a lot if you use the site lock to close all of their open tabs. And it's also something you'll see if the kid, for whatever reason, decides to close Chrome. You don't have to panic if you see this. This just means the kid closed Chrome either by accident or on purpose for whatever reason. Last question. So we cannot watch them all day long, like I think I just heard you say. No, you can only observe them during school hours. We received a set time, I believe, from 6:30 to 4:30 was the last suggestion I saw. That is not 100% set in stone, I don't believe, though. Can they reply to messages we send to student screens? The announcements, no, but they can respond to chat messages. We did cover that, but since we're out of time, I'm just going to say go ahead and rewatch the video or watch the asynchronous videos from Celia. All right, I believe that's all we have time for. Thank you for coming. Can students initiate a chat? Tommy, you mind demoing that real quick? All right,
Yep.
that is all we have time for. So after this, we're going to go ahead and move on. Tommy is demonstrating this by clicking the Chrome extension icon in the upper right of the screen. I believe he just did a raise hand.
No, it looks like it's disabled right now.
Oh, I probably didn't turn it on, but it appears that you sent a chat or something. I don't know. I got a notification on my end. I may have left that off, but
yeah, it's grayed out for me.
Okay, so he would normally click raise hand or start enter the button for starting a chat. But yes, they can initiate a chat as well. So if you're not monitoring them with Zoom, which I didn't realize was a thing until someone asked, you can get a hold of them individually that way as well. But thank you for your time. We're going to go ahead and get prepared for the next meeting.